Being a mom has to be one of the most difficult tasks in the world. I know that from personal experience. Now you might say, Brenen, how do you know that from personal experience? You're not a mom. I know that because it's what I put my mom through. Being a mom has to be one of the most difficult tasks in the world because she raised me. And moms have it hard. I mean, dads have it hard too, right, dads? Amen? That's all you're gonna get for the rest of the day. But moms have it hard because it starts with sleepless nights. When they're pregnant, we still get to sleep through the night. But they don't. Their body aches and their body's changing and they can't get comfortable no matter how many pillows they put in their bed with them. Almost no room for hubby in bed anymore because of all the pillows in bed. But they can't get comfortable with sleepless nights. And then after the baby is born, of course, follows more sleepless nights. And then as that follows, from having an infant into a young baby, and then your child gets to become about 3 to 4 years old, and then the sleepless nights continue. Daddy, I had a bad dream. Tell your mom. Bad dreams, or I'm thirsty, and there's more sleepless nights. And then your child grows up and starts sleeping through the night, and then they become a teenager, which causes more sleepless nights where you are up all night praying. Lord, wherever my teenager is at, would you please bring them home safely? Or whatever they're doing. Or maybe you know what they're doing, and that's why you're having sleepless nights where you're up all night praying. You see, moms, they have it hard. It's been said, mothers are basically a part of a scientific experiment to prove that sleep is not a crucial part of human life. Because moms go without it so often. So we appreciate mom. And we today want to show our appreciation to mom. But not only to appreciate mom, we want to celebrate mom. Well, you might say, why should I celebrate mom? My mom hasn't been that great of a mom. She wasn't always a great example. Why should I celebrate mom? Well, for starters, literally, I said this earlier, you wouldn't be here without her. Quite literally, you wouldn't be here without your mom. And so we celebrate mom, not only because of her bringing you into the world, but all the things that we've learned from mom. Moms have taught us so many things. They do, don't they? There's an article that talks about all the things that we learn from mom. I thought it was so funny. I had to share it with you today. If you think back to all the things that your mom taught you, you probably could write a novel. This person did. They said that moms teach us about anticipation. Just wait until your father gets home. Moms teach us about logic. You need to answer when I'm talking to you. And then after you do, stop talking back. Moms teach us about logic. Moms also teach us about common sense. If you fall and break your neck, you're not going to go to the store with me. Common sense. Moms teach us about genetics. They do. I love this one. You are just like your father. Moms teach us about irony in life. Keep crying and I will give you something to cry about. Moms taught us about the circle of life. I brought you into this world and I will take you out of it if you keep that attitude up. How many moms said that? No, don't admit it. Don't admit it. Don't raise your hand. That's not good. It's not good. Moms teach us about prayer. You better pray this comes out of the carpet. And maybe my favorite one, moms teach us about justice when they say things like, one day when you have kids, I hope they turn out just like you. Moms teach us so much, don't they? And they have taught us so much. And if you think back, I'm sure you could write your own novel of all the things that you've learned from mom. And that's exactly what we see in our text today in Proverbs chapter 31. We see Solomon, the author of this chapter, write a memoir of mom. Solomon is now in his older years. He's late in years. He's of old age. And he begins to think back about his mom. And he begins to write what we know as Proverbs 31 about the virtuous woman. You see, Proverbs 31 is a very well-known passage of Scripture. If you've been around the church for any length of time, you've probably gone to a women's conference called the Virtuous Woman. You've heard about this virtuous woman, but perhaps what you didn't know is this virtuous woman is actually Solomon's mom. And Solomon writes a memoir of mom. He's writing this proverb in his old age, and he's thinking back to all the things that his mom lived out. All the things that his mom was, and all the things that he learned from mom. So let's take a look at Proverbs chapter 31, beginning in verse 10. Solomon says this, "Who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain." The virtuous woman, well, one thing about her is she can be trusted. And this woman would greatly enrich the lives of the people who she is in, whether it's her husband, her children, and she brings great wealth. In other words, she's careful with coins. Or you could say her husband can trust her with the credit card. So he doesn't have any lack of gain, it says. Lack of gain is actually a reference or a term that was used when a man could no longer afford to live. He would need to go to war in order to bring back the spoils of war. And so, in other words, because of her life and the way that she lives and her frugalness and her trustworthiness, her husband doesn't have to go and take another job or go out to war, or he doesn't have to take 2 jobs because she's a woman that works within her budget. Verse 12, she does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. She works with her hands, with flax. She's a good cook. You could say, and now this is good news for you guys because you've heard your whole life growing up in the church, you need to get a virtuous woman. Listen, a virtuous woman is a good cook, and you'll be happy about that. She's the Martha Stewart type, not afraid to cook a great meal, but then again, maybe she's not the Martha Stewart type because it says that she's trustworthy with finances, and we all know that didn't work out so great for Martha Stewart. Going on, verse 14. She is like a merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. She goes the distance to get her food. In other words, you could say she drives past 3 grocery stores to the 4th because she has coupons that she's cut, or there's a sale going on at that 4th grocery store. She goes the distance to make sure that she's being a good steward. Verse 15, she also rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservants. She gets up early, so early it's still dark out, to feed her family before her family leaves. Type of mom that gets up to cook breakfast for her kids before her kids have to get out of the house. One that rises early to make sure that things are prepared for. She's one that makes sure there's food on the table for her family, whether it's breakfast or lunch or dinner. She's prepared for that. Verse 16, she considers a field and buys it. And from her profit, she plants a vineyard. She's one that's savvy with investments. She makes investments in property, and from her investments, she invests more and reinvests things. Verse 17, she girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. In other words, she goes to 24-hour fitness. A virtuous woman works out. Say, I work out. Like 2 people said that. That's cool. She goes, maybe it's not 24-hour fitness. Maybe it's Curves for some of you ladies, or Bally's or LA Fitness. But she's one that exercises in order to stay strong. Verse 18, she perceives that her merchandise is good. She clips coupons. She makes sure that she bangs on the watermelon to make sure it's ripe. She inspects those things. She doesn't buy things that's a waste of money. She makes sure the things that she spends the money on is the right things to buy for her and her family. Continuing on in verse 18, it says, and her lamp does not go out by night. This is a very interesting phrase because in the Jewish language, it has a double meaning. You see, there's two meanings in the Hebrew language where it says that her light does not go out. One is it means that she doesn't get worn out physically. As Solomon is thinking about his mom, he's remembering that his mom, although women do get worn out physically, it seemed like she didn't get worn out physically because although a virtuous woman is tired, it doesn't matter how tired she is, she still will do what's necessary to serve her family. And so Solomon's thinking about his mom and how she was so active, and it seemed like she never was physically tired because moms are like the Energizer bunnies, aren't they? They just keep going and going and going and going. And then the second meaning, and much more importantly, the virtuous woman doesn't get worn out spiritually, as moms are the light in dark times. You see, good mothers are always on. Good moms don't get breaks. It's like that Dayquil commercial where the mom wants to call out sick and you see the mom saying, I can't come in today. I'm so sorry. I can't take care of the responsibilities. I'm just not feeling well. And then the camera pans to her 2-year-old and the baby's just staring at her like, what do you mean you're taking today off? It's a great commercial because it's a classic and it's so true. Moms don't get days off. Good moms, they stay on. They stay on physically, but they also stay on spiritually, meaning they don't let their light go out. They don't take breaks. They're up in the night feeding. Their moms don't say, the baby needs to be fed. Tough luck. I mean, it's just going to have to be hungry. Moms do what's necessary, and their light never goes out. And that's why when Jesus taught in Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, we'll see in just a few weeks, Jesus said, so let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Listen, the people who burn out spiritually are those that don't stay on. They go on and then off and then on and off. They do really good with God for 2 weeks. They read their Bible for 2 weeks and then they're off for a week. Or I went to church last week. I don't need to go this week. And those that go on and off are the ones that find themselves burning out. But those that just stay on and are consistent in staying on, in devotions and going to church and serving their family, those are the ones that don't get burnt out. Many times when we're facing burnout or growing weary and doing good, we think we need a break. Just turn off for a week. Step back for a week. But oftentimes, it's in the turning off we find ourselves never being turned back on and being the light to the world and shining bright. And so it's so important to stay always on, like Solomon says the virtuous woman is. Then verse 19, she stretches out her hands to the distaff. The distaff is a staff that's disced. It's a distaff. No, not really. A distaff is actually a needle and thread. It's more like a sewing machine in that day. She is one that is a homemaker. And it says that her hands hold the spindle. In other words, she uses instruments with her hands to make clothing and to repair and do patchwork, sew on missing buttons. Verse 20, she extends her hand to the poor. Yes, she reaches out her hands to the needy. She has compassion. She's a woman of compassion for those that are in need because she has been so virtuous with her finances that she's able now to bless other people who are in need. Notice the attitude isn't, oh, you should have been more virtuous. You should have done better with your budget. You should have clipped more coupons. You've been lazy, and because of that, now you're struggling financially. Well, maybe you should figure it out. It wasn't be more like me. No, there was a compassion in her heart for those who were in need. compassion that we all need to have for those who are in need. In verse 21, it says that she is not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. Scarlet is, or can be, also rendered as double garmented. In other words, her family doesn't just have a cloak to wear, they have a heavy jacket, so they're not going to freeze if it gets cold because of being a good steward. You know, moms that bundle those kids up for those cold days. Ever have your mom tell you, hey, don't forget your jacket? And if you have ever had a mom tell you, don't forget your jacket, raise up your hand right now. I mean, I think everyone said, hey, I think you need to put a sweatshirt on. It's cold outside. That's what he's saying here. That's what a virtuous woman does. Verse 22, she makes tapestry for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Purple clothing is the most expensive clothing of that day for the process of dyeing it that color. It would be a very extensive process in order to get it that deep purple color. And so if someone was wearing purple, it was like wearing designer clothes of the day. That's what it's saying. This woman basically has her family in designer clothing because, well, it's not that it was just because it was expensive, but it was also fashionable. And I think that's cool that it says that this mom made sure her kids, her husband was wearing fashionable clothing. How many wives thank the Lord that that's biblical to make sure your husband wears something that's fashionable? Honey, you need to take that off right now. You need to burn that because God would forbid you actually to wear that. Verse 23. It says, her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. Men would sit inside the gates in their city because they were men of influence. And they would spend time and dedicate time to be there to make decisions for their city. And the men that did that were only able to do that because of their wives, being virtuous women. The husbands were freed up to tend to these important matters. They were there to be able to make judgments for others. In other words, the men were free to be able to minister to other people because their wives had their house in order. So many men can't be available to serve in ministry, and vice versa too, because the husbands or the wives aren't doing what they ought to be doing, and they keep each other from service to the Lord and to others. A virtuous woman is one that has things so in order that the husband is free to go in to serve and bless others. Verse 24, she makes linen garments and sells them and supplies sashes for the merchants. In other words, she gets goods and she sells them. She has a side business. We're talking some side business that she works out of the house and to bring in a little extra profit, to bring in some increase. Verse 25, strength and honor are her clothing. She shall rejoice in time to come. In other words, she lives for the future. She rejoices in time to come because she's not so caught up in right now that she isn't thinking about planning and being prepared for the future. She opens her mouth with wisdom. I think every person should underline that and have that underlined in their Bible, because so many times people open their mouths and everything comes out but wisdom. This woman, the virtuous woman, only opens her mouth when she has something of wisdom to come out of it. Not when she's angry, not when something that will not work the righteousness of God. In other words, something that's not going to be right with God, that the Bible says the anger of man does not do. And so she only opens her mouth when wisdom is going to come out. And this woman, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. In other words, she doesn't lash out. When the law is broken, the law of kindness is on her tongue. She speaks kindly, gently. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. means she doesn't sit all day on social media. she has things to do. She's not twiddling her thumb trying to figure out what do I need to do today or what should I do. She's got some responsibilities to do. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. Now Solomon, talking about thinking back, writing a memoir of mom, is thinking back about his mom. And like I said, many of you are very familiar with Proverbs 31 and the virtuous woman. But the question really is, does this woman really exist? Can I really be all of that and a bag of chips? Is that really possible to be? Was Solomon's mom really all of this? It seems like this mom had it all together. She's the perfect mom. And maybe you feel like, I can never be all of that. Was she really that great? Well, Solomon's mom actually was from a very questionable reputation. For his mother's name was a woman named Bathsheba. Bathsheba. Remember back King David? King David was not where he was supposed to be. And there was a woman bathing on the roof. And many commentators and biblical scholars agree that they believe that Bathsheba knew that David at that time of the day would be on his balcony, walking around and looking over the city, because it was a normal practice for the king to do that. And she put herself, many believe, in plain sight of the king. And for when David called for her, she went willingly. There's nothing in the story where she was forced to go or she was demanded to come, but she went willingly. There's nothing in the story where she refused the king, but she participated willingly in that adulterous affair that they ended up falling into and having a son out of that adulterous affair. David ended up murdering her husband because of that affair. That was Bathsheba. David never became the king that he could have been and would have been if he didn't fall into that sin. Bathsheba was the one that brought David down and ended up losing his kingdom ultimately because of Bathsheba and that sin that he committed with her. She brought a great man down as a woman of iniquity. She participated in adultery and ended up marrying David. And out of that adulterous affair, they had a son, but the Lord required the life of their child. And their second son that they had together in marriage was a boy named Solomon. A young man named, actually, before he was called Solomon, they named him Lemuel. Lemuel, which means devoted to God. Bathsheba was a woman of a reputation that would have been known throughout all of the kingdom as a woman who brought King David down. A woman that was known for her sin. A woman who was known for her failure. Her character was described by her sin. But listen, maybe you in your life feel like because of past sin, you can't ever be this person. Because of present failures, you can't be who God would be calling you to be. Listen, you can't change your reputation, but God can change your character. And when you allow God to change your character, making you into the woman he would have for you to be, then your character changes your reputation. You can't change your reputation, but when you change your character will change your reputation. And that is what happened with this woman named Bathsheba. Bathsheba is the virtuous woman. Bathsheba, who we think so little of, becomes to be a woman that is admired and esteemed throughout all the ages, as the Proverbs 31 virtuous woman. Because as time went on, the Lord changed her life, and she shared what she knew with Solomon. What did she share? Solomon saw what she lived in her life, but I want to show you what she taught Solomon with her words. She gives Solomon 3 things in the beginning of this chapter as Solomon thinks back of a memoir of mom, as he thinks back of memories of what his mom said to him. She gives him 3 things. Number 1, watch out for women. I thought all you ladies would be like, amen, tell my son, preach it, pastor. Watch out for women. It's found in verse 2. What, my son? And what, my son of my womb? And what, the son of my vows? Do not give your strength to women, nor your ways to that which destroys kings. She says, watch out for women, because women can destroy kings. She would know from first-hand experience because of her relationship with David. David's reign was never what it could have been because of his sin. And it seems moms have a way of knowing what to warn their kids of. And as she has a son, she warns them of women that would be promiscuous, that would bring them down from ever fulfilling and stepping into all that God would have them to do. So be careful, watch out for it, because there's women that will bring you down. She would say, I know, because I was one of them. You see, you don't have to be perfect. Moms, listen, you don't have to be perfect. Many moms feel like they have to be perfect in order to teach their children or for their children to listen to them. But oftentimes it's out of your imperfection that speaks the greatest message. And so she would share with her son to watch out for women. Moms have a way of knowing everything that their kids are doing anyways. No wonder she warns her child, watch out for women. She knows Solomon, who would have 1,000 wives. Son, you got to watch out for women. Moms know whatever it is that you do, wherever it is that you go. It seems like moms always know. Maybe it's because moms are momniscient. I don't know. But they have a way of knowing. And this mom warns her son to watch out for women. Number 2, she says to watch out for wine. Verse 4, it is not for kings, O Lemuel. Lemuel is a nickname or a name that was given to Solomon. Solomon was really his nickname, but Lemuel was the name that they gave to him. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the justice of all the afflicted. So she says, listen, because you might make bad decisions, because you might forget what you ought to be doing when you are intoxicated, just stay away from it. Don't play with the fire. If you want to be successful as a king or as a leader or as a person that wants to have great impact, then don't drink, because you won't be remembering what you should be doing. Your judgment will be inhibited from doing what you need to be doing in your life. Well, who should drink? Well, she goes on to explain this in verse 6. Give strong drink to him who is dying. In other words, it was a painkiller for someone that was dying on their deathbed. Now we have modern medicine to help people not be in pain for that. But in that day, that's what it was used for. And that's who should be using it. Someone that wants to die or is dying. And she goes on to say, and wine to those who are bitter of heart. Let him drink and forget his poverty and remember his misery no more. Here's the people that she says can drink or if they want to drink, let them go ahead and drink. It's the people that are bitter. What does Jesus call us to do? To not be bitter, to forgive, to forget, to not hold that against people. Interesting, she refers to bitterness as poison, because that's really what bitterness will do to you. It will poison you. So she advises her son wisely. So she says, watch out for women, watch out for wine, and number 3, watch out for the weak. Now, this isn't a watch out like avoid like the other 2. This is watch out like look out for. Look out for the weak people. She goes on to say in verse 8, open your mouth for the speechless in the cause of all who are appointed to die. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. Look out for those people that can't speak up for themselves. Look out and defend those people who can't defend themselves. I think of the unborn babies and this mass genocide that's happening across the world. And that Solomon is told by his mom to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. And those who are in need, or those who would be taken advantage of because of their social position, or because of their power, or lack thereof, or because of their finances or lack thereof. Look out for those people, to watch out for them, to take care of people that just won't always take care of you. You see, we scratch backs of people who can scratch our backs back. But oftentimes, we are willing to do very little for people who we know we can't get anything or gain anything from. Solomon is advised by his mom, this virtuous woman, to watch out for those people who have nothing, to take care of them. And Lemuel, my son, Lemuel, which means devoted to God, this little Lemuel, he becomes king, King Solomon. And what does he do? Well, he marries has 1,000 wives and concubines. There goes watching out for women. He has drunken parties where he's known as the biggest partier in the world. Drunken revelries and all sorts of horrible atrocities taking place in these alcoholic parties. Watch out for wine. There goes that advice. And watch out for the weak. Solomon taxed the poor so much that he accumulated so much gold that silver was a worthless commodity in his kingdom. And because of that, his kingdom was split eventually. And when Bathsheba died, Solomon was going in the opposite direction of her teachings that she had given to him. When Bathsheba died, she must have thought, I failed. My son is so far from where he ought to be. When she was on her deathbed, she must have thought that she didn't do a good job. But little did she know that what she lived and what she said stuck with her son. So much so that Solomon, older in age, thinks back now as an older man, late in years, thinks back and writes a memoir of mom and records the things that she had taught to him, although he didn't listen for a season of his life. And the things that she lived, although maybe she thought went unnoticed because she was never thanked for them and all the sacrifices and things that she did. When she died, she must have thought, I was a failure because everything that I did and everything that I said was ignored. But Solomon came to a point in his life as an old man who would say things like this in Proverbs 22, verse 6, to train up a child in the way that he should go. And when he is old, he will not depart from it. Solomon isn't just giving some nice principle for you parents to train your children up in the way that they should go and to teach them those things of the Lord and to live it out in your life because it's just a nice principle. Solomon says that from personal experience because when he is old, he realized the value in it. And yes, it took him 13 years to get to that point. But after that season of disobedience, he realized the value in his mother's life and the value in his mother's instruction. Listen, Mom, on this Mother's Day, maybe you're feeling like your son or your daughter isn't doing what you've taught them, what you've lived out, what you've instructed to them. They're not listening to it. And now because of it, you feel like you're a failure or you failed as a mom because I should have done this or I could have done this. Listen, Mom, the story isn't over. Sometimes moms can feel like they didn't do a good job or they didn't do all that well. Matter of fact, your children aren't doing all that well and you hold yourself responsible for it. You view your children instead of as a child, more as a project. piece of work and you feel that it's your job, listen, don't give up. Because just as Solomon proves, as a son that was living in rebellion to his mother's instructions, his mom had a greater impact than she ever realized she had. A mom's impact is endless, and so is her job description. So moms, don't give up. If you feel like a failure, listen, no one failed more than Bathsheba. She never knew that she would be known as the virtuous woman because that was written about her long after she had passed. But she became the virtuous woman that we all know and love and admire and esteem today. Mother, listen, mom that's here today, you are a virtuous woman. How do I know? It doesn't matter your past failures. It doesn't matter what you've done. Listen, if that's been given to God, that's been forgiven and forgotten. You are a virtuous woman because on this day, your day, when you can choose to do whatever you want to do, breakfast in bed, beach, whatever it is that you could do, you've chosen this day to say, as for me and my family, we're going to church. As for me and my family, we're serving the Lord. As for me and my family, we're putting God first. And because of that, you are a virtuous woman. And you are one that although you failed in the past, you can be known as a woman that her character has changed because of the life that you now live. Maybe right now you feel like a Bathsheba. You feel like maybe I haven't been the best example of a godly woman. Listen, don't worry about your reputation. Focus on your character. And as you allow God to work these attributes in you as a godly woman, He then will develop those things in you and through you, and your reputation will change, and you too will be known as a virtuous woman. Or maybe you're here today and you're a Solomon. Listen, Mr. Solomon or Miss Solomon, you who are children here today, maybe you've been dragged here by your mom. Mom, what do you want for Mother's Day? Just for you to go to church with me. Listen, Solomon, maybe you've been living in rebellion to your mom's instructions. What she's taught you about the Lord and the things that she's lived that you know to be true. Maybe you're here today as a Solomon and you only are here because she begged you to be here. And all she's saying is, Solomon, serve the Lord. My son, my daughter, live for the Lord. Give your life to the Lord. I know the pain, the problems that will come from living apart from that. Why? Because I've lived it. And I would say, don't follow my footsteps, but follow Jesus' footsteps. Be a follower of Christ today. And you might say, well, listen, I'm not ready to do that because, well, I have another party. I want to party a little bit more. Or I want to, sleep around some more before I settle down and get my life right with God. Solomon did all of those things. And it came to a point after 13 years, he said it was all emptiness. It was all grabbing for the wind and nothing to ever hold on to, leaving him feel more and more and more empty, finally until he came to a point where he realized the only thing that will satisfy is God. And he lived the rest of his life serving the Lord. Listen, Mr. Solomon or Miss Solomon, whoever you may be, maybe a son or a daughter, maybe even in adult age, maybe your parents have even gone and are with the Lord now. Maybe your mom's in heaven. Maybe you're an adult now. But now you think back to those things that mom told you, those things that mom taught you, and you realize they're right. Listen, the best gift that you can give, Solomon, to your mother on Mother's Day is to heed her advice. Listen to what mom said and give your life to the Lord, because everything else is emptiness. It's time to grow up like Solomon did. And he grew up, and when he realized mom was right, she knew what she was talking about. There's nothing there for me. I'm going to give my life to the Lord. And when you, on this Mother's Day, give your life to the Lord, I can speak for all the moms here today that are the Bathshebas, that maybe haven't lived the perfect life, But now, all they want is their son, their daughter, to walk with the Lord. May we be ones like Solomon that says nothing else matters. Remembering the life that mom lived, as many of you today isn't just about celebrating mom and appreciating mom, but even commemorating mom. The life that mom lived, as Solomon thinks back to the life that his mom lived as the virtuous woman, may we be people that see that life, heed that counsel, and make that wise decision in following after Jesus today. In Jesus' name.